And I also do like to show Unitarians that you know, every time they try to shut me down, that all it does is prolong the conflict. So that's what I did. I said, okay, fine, let them shut me down for a year. I'll come back and I'll resume my protest, and I'll be refreshed and, you know, basically making a fresh start of it after a year's holiday. And that's exactly what happened. So anyway, Sue Montgomery was part of this effort to shut down my protest, which was successful. So Sue Montgomery contributed to my protest being shut down for 1 full year. And my protest certainly by 2007, indeed much earlier, included protesting against child abuse and child sex abuse committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers. That may not have been obvious from my picket signs, because I spoke about clergy abuse in general terms, because I'm addressing all forms of clergy abuse. But well, it looks like the wind's getting my picket signs. But nonetheless, you know, clergy abuse certainly includes sexual abuse of children by clergy. And in fact, you know, when one talks about clergy abuse, if you use the term clergy abuse, the first thing people think about is, you know, more specifically Roman Catholic clergy abuse and Roman Catholic priests molesting children and otherwise sexually abusing children, raping children, and so on. So, you know, everybody knows that clergy abuse includes sexual abuse of children. So it wasn't necessary to specify that as being part of my protest. But nonetheless, after the Unitarian Universalist Association falsely accused me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel in an effort to cover up and hide pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers, specifically rape of children, then I got a little bit more specific with picket signs such as these ones, which say Unitarian Universalists misuse blasphemy law to cover up and deny pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers. So there's a father walking by with a young girl, explaining to her that this is a protest. He may not be going into all the details, but who knows? Who knows what he's telling his daughter about this protest? He might actually use this as an educational moment about child sex abuse. You know, educate his daughter about child sex abuse so she can protect herself from those who would sexually abuse her. That's certainly my hope. Anyhow, so that's it. Sue Montgomery is not only totally complicit in terms of complicit silence, but Sue Montgomery has in various ways actively involved herself in Unitarian Universalist and, you know, more specifically Montreal Unitarian efforts to cover up and hide clergy sexual abuse of children. So that's it. That's how one Unitarian mother in particular, Sue Montgomery, helps Unitarians cover up child abuse. And actually more recently, Sue Montgomery, in an effort to, you know, silence me in terms of my criticism of her personally and her role in Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse cover-up, December 11th of last year, 2017, Sue Montgomery had me arrested for alleged criminal harassment of her. And she's essentially trying to pretend that my peaceful public protests against her own involvement in Unitarian Universalist cover-up of clergy abuse, such as is expressed on this picket sign here. You know, this picket sign is specifically about how Sue Montgomery, in her capacity as the Gazette's justice reporter, never reported the fact that the Unitarian Universalist Association falsely accused me of violating Canada's blasphemy law in clergy abuse cover up legal bullying. Indeed, more specifically, child sex abuse cover up legal bullying. So Sue Montgomery, you know, wanted to totally silence me. She wanted to prevent me from coming and asking questions at city council meetings. She wanted to prevent me from protesting, not only against her personally, but she tried to shut down my protest in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal again. Now, obviously, that wasn't entirely successful because, well, here I am. But what did happen is that, you know, based on this arrest for alleged criminal harassment, Sue Montgomery tried to have me placed under conditions, legal, you know, court-imposed conditions, which would prevent me from going to city council meetings and so on, basically prevent me from being anywhere near any of her workplaces, and thus obviously not be able to participate in public questions periods of city council meetings, either in Côte-des-Neiges, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, or Montreal. But she also, in the conditions, the Unitarian Church of Montreal was specifically mentioned, and it was very, very clear that Sue, in addition to, you know, all of the other conditions, was demanding, you know, that I could not be anywhere near the Unitarian Church of Montreal, thus preventing me from protesting. And these conditions would be in place until such a time as they were successfully challenged in court, you know, or until such a time as I was acquitted. So the interesting thing is that the section of the conditions, which specifically mentioned the Unitarian Church of Montreal, was actually a section which is devoted to exceptions to the conditions, which I don't think that was the intent. I think this was an error on the part of the SPVM police officer who drew up the conditions. You know, they wrote Unitarian Church of Montreal into a section that's devoted to exceptions to the conditions rather than the conditions themselves, I believe unwittingly. And I didn't know this. It looked to me, you know, reading the document, which was in French, it just looked, you know, very much like Unitarian Church of Montreal was clearly part of, you know, the areas where I could not be. So essentially, between December 11th of 2017 and February 19th of 2018, when my lawyer was able to get the conditions clarified and modified in such a way that the Unitarian Church of Montreal was completely eliminated from the conditions, no mention of it whatsoever. And also, thankfully, I was able to get the conditions modified, which allow me to attend city council meetings that are open to the public. You know, there was a period of more than 3 months, is it? Let's see, December to January to February. No, I guess it's 2 months. So more than 2 months, my protest was shut down as a result of, you know, this arrest for alleged criminal harassment and related conditions. Admittedly, partly as a result of my failure to understand that, in fact, according to the actual written documents, the Unitarian Church of Montreal was never part of the places where I couldn't be. But that was, again, that was an error on the part of police, and it was an error on my interpretation of that clause. Just didn't understand it properly. But my lawyer saw right away that this was a section for exceptions, and he also agreed that this was an error on the part, you know, that they clearly wanted that condition to be, you know, this was not, you know, an exception that was put in from the beginning. This became very, very clear when, after I resumed my protest in late February or early March, certainly early March, a few, you know, 1 or 2 Sundays after I resumed my protest, well, Sue Montgomery herself came to the church, and this was on the 18th of March, St. Patrick's Day Parade Sunday in Montreal. So I was protesting and walking along like this, coming up to the corner, And Sue Montgomery stopped and stood around where that slogan is, and pulled out her cell phone, took a photo of me, and then immediately called the police, trying to get me arrested for breach of conditions. And she kicked down the picket signs here. She kicked down the picket signs which clearly say Unitarian Universalist misuse blasphemy law to cover up and deny pedophilia and rape. Those are the first two picket signs she kicked into the street. Then she proceeded to kick down the other picket signs. At the time, I wasn't displaying this particular picket sign. I was basically showing the other side of it to basically just, to be more safe than sorry kind of thing. So this was what was shown. You liars, bear false witness against me. Certainly Sue Montgomery is one of those Unitarian Universalist liars who bear false witness against me in more ways than one. Yeah, so she kicked that in the street. And she also kicked this Church of the Image Tarnishing Ministers picket sign into the street, which on the back says Church of the Bad News. And it is indeed Church of the Bad News in more ways than one. So Sue Montgomery literally, kicked my picket signs protesting against the misuse of blasphemy law to hide pedophilia and rape into the street. And when I put them back up, while she was still there, she was basically waiting for the police to arrive to get me arrested for, allegedly violating conditions. And when I put them back up, Sue Montgomery grabbed this one anyway in her own two hands and threw it into the street very soon, almost immediately after I set it back up again. So this is what I would describe as hands-on participation in Unitarian Universalist cover-up and denial of pedophilia and rape. When Sue Montgomery, who is now the Deputy Mayor of Montreal and the Mayor of Côte-des-Neiges, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce Borough, when she, kicks this and other related signs into the street, but more specifically, when with her own two hands she picks this up and literally throws it into the street, well, that's what I call hands-on participation in Unitarian Universalist cover-up of pedophilia and rape. So well done, Sue Montgomery, for your hand.